We're going to move on to some questions, and these were assigned randomly. So we're going to have a question and answer, and then one randomly assigned response to that answer, and one done by ranked choice. So the first question is about income inequality, and the first person to answer, who will have 2 minutes to respond, is Tim White. And then the first response, Mike Byrne will have a minute to rebuttal, and then Roz Mason will have a minute after that. So the first question is, we are supposed to be a free market economy, but our current monopolistic system has resulted in stagnant wages, unregulated markets, and extreme wealth inequalities. As a member of Congress, how will you address this state of economic injustice?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is pass a bill that David and Charles Koch forfeit all their assets. 10% of the population owns 76% of the wealth in this country. The 7 heirs of Sam Walton have more wealth than the bottom 140 million people of this country. It's beyond obscene. Now the question is, what can you do about it? We just had the worst tax bill in the history of the country a few weeks ago. Even people like Michael Bloomberg, Warren Buffett said this is dumb because it puts the country at risk. If we were to have another recession, we would be less able to respond to it. So one of the first things I want to do, if I get to Congress, is I want to go after the corporations that are currently getting subsidies. ExxonMobil, they get subsidies. Dow Chemical, they get subsidies. There's so many corporate agricultural people that are getting subsidies. I want the subsidies gone for any corporate entity in this country. The next thing I want to do is I want to have an examination of the taxes. The highest tax rate in this country once upon a time was 94% on incomes over $250,000. That was 1945. All right, I don't propose we go back to 94%, but this current thing of 21% is obscene. I would also like to address the carried interest loophole that none of them even brought up. This is where hedge fund managers get to pay 15%. They treat all their income as capital gains. As a finance guy, this is what I did all my life. I know the ins and outs of taxation and corporate finance. By having that knowledge, that gives me the unique perspective as to how to go after it. Won't be popular because the Democrats and the Republicans share the same guilt on this issue. So I'm going after both of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. The first response will be from Mike Byrne. You have a minute.
So Tim's an expert on the top earners and the big corporations. I'm an expert on the people that haven't got any. 80% of the people in this country have less than $1,000 in the bank. Over half the people in this country cannot afford a single check engine light. It'll put them in financial ruin. How many people have a check engine light on right now? All the young folks. Okay, so income inequality, we've got to start by raising the minimum wage to $15. And then we have to look at where our money is going. Housing, healthcare. We need single-payer healthcare. So that's not a big expense. We need subsidized housing. We've got to do something to bring down the housing costs. We've got to work on where the people that are poor and haven't got the money, where that money goes to stretch it out.
We're going to move on to Roz. You have 1 minute.
I appreciate the specificity here. I would just like to add one thing that's one of my pet interventions because it seems to be a lever around incentives, and that's the importance of benefit corporations. Capitalism is not the enemy, but how we play the game is. And right now, profit is the number one motive. It's written into the corporate charters. And benefit corporations, available in 33 states, gives an opportunity to also put on an equal playing field with profit, the benefits to the community, the employees, and stewardship of the environment. So there is a way that we can work with what we have and make it better, and in so doing, create long-lasting effects that actually steer our economy in a more humane way. I've got 30 seconds, so I'm also going to talk about how wealth inequality, as I think we all know, it creates some fundamental destabilization in our country. And if people feel that their fundamental existence is not valued by the society, that drives the desperation, that drives the opioid crisis, that drives a lot of healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next question. It will be structured in the same way. This question is on big money in politics. The 2-minute answer will be provided by Jamie McLeod Skinner. The first response, Jim Crary, and then the second response by Eric Burnett. So the question is Kate Titus, who is the executive director of Common Cause Oregon, wrote recently that here in Oregon, we've seen a Nike co-founder, Phil Knight, make the biggest campaign contributions in Oregon's history to both Democratic and Republican candidates for governor. In 2012, Knight's $250,000 contribution to Governor Kitzhaber appeared to buy him Kitzhaber's leadership in pushing through an enormous 30-year tax break for Nike. In the face of the dialing for dollars game, how will you be sure to represent your constituents, the voters, not your donors? Jamie, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Governor Kitzhaber, although he did some great things for our state, it comes down to ethics, and he was required to step aside, and I think appropriately so, for his the family public benefit that came from him and his spouse or his partner, rather than focusing on the business and the ethics of our state. So I touched on this actually a little bit earlier. I've been a part of public campaign finance reform. I think it's critically important. So setting up legislation to overturn Citizens United, get these structures into place, I think that's important. I've been focused, and I probably was raised. This was raised because I'm the largest fundraiser in the campaign of the Democratic candidates, far distant from Walden, but the head of the Dems. And I've been taking from individuals and accepting donations from individuals. It's not uncommon to get $4 and $5 donations from folks. I also, a really very special note I received is from someone in La Grande who, with the sensitive handwriting, said they've never donated to a campaign before, and they sent me a check for $25. And so we've been incredibly careful in terms of how we're spending money and how we're investing money in this campaign. In Washington, I will focus on, this is what I did before when I was in elected office. I didn't accept any money from anyone who had business before the council. I would do the same in Washington. If there was folks who had business before Congress, I would not accept money. So this thing about corporations, and I would not accept corporate money, pharmaceuticals, that kind of thing that we're seeing being taken advantage of now. That's been my policy in the past. And actually, when I served on the city council, I would not even let someone buy me a cup of coffee because my philosophy was, I don't care how wealthy or how poor you are, you should have equal access. I showed up, I was available to my constituents. That's something I commit to do for all of you. But I will not take money from corporations.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, Jim Crary, you have 1 minute to respond.
This is my issue. Love it. Again, what's insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The reason I want campaign finance reform, constitutional reform, is so people that get elected start representing their constituents, not their contributors. Do you know how much money the Koch brothers are going to be pouring into this midterm election? $400 million. So you think they're making that contribution because they're stupid? You think they're making that contribution because they're altruistic and they want to have better government? Or do you think they're making that contribution because they expect a return on their investment? It's the latter. It's not the former. So one of the things that I want to do when I get elected, and I'm going to do this because I'm not going to be beholden to special interests, is answer my own phone 5 hours a week. Can you imagine who has called Walden's office and actually talked to Walden? Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. All right, the final response on this question goes to Eric Burnett. You have 1 minute.
Okay, I'm not going to make this easy on the audience because I agree with an awful lot of what's been said. However, let's look at where money in campaigns goes. It's time. It's airtime, and it's just the length of campaigns. Shorten campaign cycles. This is absurd. The fact that we're doing this now, thank God you all are here. I'm really happy for this. We should be able to answer this question way before November. Shorten the campaign cycles. Media. It used to be that media was kind of required to provide fair time, fair access. What happened to that? Where did that go? Bring that back. And the last thing, can we please just get rid of the doggone electoral college? Please?
Thank you so much. Our next question is on racial justice, and it will be answered. The answer will first answer is from Jim Crary. He'll have 2 minutes to respond, and then Jenny Nearing and Jamie McLeod Skinner will each have a minute. So the racial justice question is: the regressive populism of Donald Trump played on some white people's economic insecurity by directing their anger towards immigrants and people of color. Black, brown, and indigenous people in our communities suffer not only from physical violence, but from a political and legal system that intentionally disenfranchises them. Although African Americans and Latinos make up a quarter of the U.S. population, they make up 57% of all prisoners. What will you do to advocate and advance racial justice? So, Jim Crary, you have 2 minutes.
My son is, well, my first wife was black, so that makes my son black. So I actually have some real interest in this question. And I look at what's happening in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, they're all Americans. Do you think if it was Texas, do you think if it was Colorado, or do you think if it was some other state that after 4 months there'd still be 450,000 people without electricity? No way. No way. There's a reason. And it probably has to do with not only the fact that it's an island, but it's also maybe the color of the skin of the people that live in Puerto Rico. So racism is rampant. It's not rampant. It definitely, we've made strides in my lifetime. When I was born, we had Jim Crow. I'd have never thought we'd add a black president. We have made strides. Unfortunately, we're taking some steps back this time, so we need to go forward. How would I do it? Well, first of all, let's change the tax code. Instead of giving tax cuts to the rich and to the corporations who don't need them, let's, instead of trying trickle-down economics, let's try trickle-up. Let's give tax cuts to the lower and the middle-income groups, let them spend their money, and that money will go to benefit the corporations, not the other way around. Let's do things like a livable minimum wage. It was talked about $15 an hour. Absolutely. You know, let's make people that work for a living, allow them to do it. Let's increase the earned income tax credit. So if you're a lower income person, you're going to have more disposable income. Let's increase the child care credit as well. Again, help people out. Let's make child care something that's affordable, and so you can actually work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. The first response goes to Jenny Nearing. You have 1 minute.
So there are two things I think we need to really focus on. One is we need complete overhaul and reform of our criminal justice system. We need to be looking at nonviolent crimes and looking at how we're going to help these people actually recover their lives instead of destroying them. Taking someone, we've seen what's happened with the federal marijuana laws, criminalizing something and then ruining someone's life and having them no chance to ever recover from that, and it needs to be completely overhauled and reformed. The second thing we need to do is there have been many pilot studies and projects that have proven that you can address conscious and unconscious racial bias and profiling, and we need to bring this into the police stations, into the training, so that our police force does not feed the problem consciously or unconsciously.
Thank you so much. And the last response goes to Jamie McLeod Skinner. You have 1 minute.
Thanks. Yes, prison reform, our system now is privatized. It's crazy. Our state is actually making strides in this right now, looking at a different approach to prison reform. We should be looking at the federal level as well. The other thing, California passed some great legislation around forgiveness under their 3 strikes law. They had folks who then hold criminal records because of marijuana. They're looking at now at forgiving that. That's something we should be doing nationwide, especially when marijuana has been legalized in several states. Other things we should be looking at is voting rights for felons who have served their time. You served your debt to society. You should retain your full citizenship again. And what was the other thing I want to say? Oh, this is something you may not know. It's when I studied water law at the U of O, I also studied India law. There, you can be in Oregon on tribal land, two people next to each other commit the same crime and go through different systems, have different results. We need standardized and fair laws for everyone.
Thank you so much. Our next question is going to be on climate change. The first answer goes to Mike Byrne, and then the first response is Jamie McLeod Skinner, and the second response goes to Tim White. So the question on climate change. Many nations have expanded their body of legal rights to recognize a human right to a healthy environment, including Spain, France, Portugal, Greece, and Finland. However, as global warming accelerates and ecosystems are pushed to collapse, we're finding that the human right to a healthy environment cannot be achieved without securing the rights of the environment itself. This means recognizing in law the right of nature to be healthy and thrive. Several countries, including Bolivia and Ecuador, have done this. What would be your strategy to move from where we are now as a country that provides personhood for corporations to a country that supports personhood for nature or Mother Earth? Please be as specific as possible. We're going to start with Mike Byrne. You have 2 minutes.
This was the worst possible question for me because I do not believe that we can legislate some of these issues. And this is what I mean by that. To statutorily say Mother Earth has certain protections. First of all, the problem I have with that is the protections are already there because you cannot separate human activity from consequences in the environment. What that means is we have to have an EPA that actually enforces the law instead of gutting it under Scott Pruitt. I can think of no better reason to turn this table over than to get Scott Pruitt out of there. He is one dangerous man. If the corporations are people, then why can't we prosecute them for trespass? Why can't we process them for assault? Why can't we prosecute them for battery? The laws are already there. To make Mother Nature another entity in front of the law, we have too many laws. That's why I'm from Eastern Oregon, or maybe that's because I'm from Eastern Oregon. Okay. Did I mention Scott Pruitt? Too many laws, it's going to be problematic. I understand exactly we all believe the same thing. But let's go after the corporations that are causing this environmental damage. They're people, right? Citizens arrest. I'm a founding member of the Dalles Air Coalition. We have a huge pollution problem in the Dalles with the creosote plant. I'm a member of the Eastside Portland Air Coalition, where you might have heard of Bullseye Glass, Cleaner Air Oregon, which is a direct result of that. Let's go after the corporations and make them follow the laws. They're people. We follow the laws.
Thank you so much. The first response on this question goes to Jamie McLeod Skinner. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'd take a slightly different approach because I don't like the idea that corporations are people. I'd like to kind of reverse that. But we can approach this, and it is being approached right now by through something called the public trust doctrine. And that concept says that there are certain natural resources and cultural resources that belong to us as the public, kind of like our public lands, and the government should hold them in trust and protect them. And there's a lawsuit going on right now, Juliana versus the U.S., where kids have come forward and essentially challenged the government for follow that. It's going on. It's a federal. It's fascinating, but that's a real opportunity. I studied the public trust doctrine under Mary Wood at the University of Oregon. She's a real champion of this. But that would be the way, if we promote the public trust doctrine, that would put the onus on the shoulders of the government to protect us all and protect those resources on our behalf, and the government can then be held accountable for that, and that would be the obligation of folks in elected office. I've worked on these issues before. I served on the board of Sustainable Silicon Valley. When I was at the city of Sunnyvale as a planner, I wrote the city's first solar plan. I worked on a lot of natural resource issues. And so both as an engineer, as an environmental planner, I worked for a regional water agency for 5 years as an environmental planner. From this perspective, as well as from the legal perspective, I think there's strategic ways that we can approach that are undergoing right now. But I actually think that's an effective way to do it.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And we're going to go to Tim White. You have 1 minute to respond.
Well, the question refers to Bolivia and Ecuador as signing on to this. I lived in South America for 3 years. I lived in Venezuela. I traveled to almost every country in South America. So when South America starts writing things about making sure their environment's clean, let me assure you, they've got a long ways to go before they even get close to the United States. Food, water, sanitation, these are all issues all over South America. As far as the climate change is concerned, I believe the cap and trade is absolutely the way we should be going right now. It's the best first step. We have measured the clean energy bill here in Oregon, which I encourage everybody to support. It's going to not only help us, but it will probably also create about $700 million a year that we hope to use for solar. They're going to take the dams out on the Klamath. We're hoping to take those dams out on the Gorge. We're going to need to really go nuts on developing solar technology in this state. As a result of that, that's what I think we should do.
Thank you so much. Our next question is on healthcare. It actually is this time. The first response goes to Jenny Nearing. The second is to Eric Burnett, and then Jim Crary will finish us out. So the question on healthcare is, in our country, healthcare is more expensive and serves fewer people per capita with worse outcomes than any other developed country. This is the result of treating healthcare as a commodity. What would be your strategy to move from where we are now to a system that honors healthcare as a human right? Please be as specific as possible. So the first answer, Jenny, you have 2 minutes.
And I want you all to know I did not request this question because I feel like people think this is my only issue. It is, having spent my entire career trying to take care of people and frustrated and blocked by our system, I think there are 3 things we definitely need to do to try and fix the system that we can do immediately. One is we have got to completely change the way that we pay for health care. The single payer model is a very workable solution. There are other workable solutions too, but we have trying to move towards that with the Affordable Care Act. It doesn't work if it's not affordable. So we have to get the cost of healthcare down, whether it's single payer or we find the standardized insurance system. We can't afford either one unless we get rid of the waste. So the waste has to get out of there. Part of that comes with changing the insurance, and single payer would be part of that solution, but not all of it. The second thing that we need to do is get down the cost of drugs. And there's 3 prongs that I know of that will work for that. One is that we need to get the loopholes out that are keeping the drug corporations blocking us bringing generics to market so that we can get the cost down of drugs that we know have been around long enough that they don't deserve to have any patents, and those generics are just as good. The second thing is we have to get rid of all of the middleman expenses that are driving up the cost of drugs by pharmacy benefit managers who add nothing to our health, but all they do is make money getting the drugs from the drug companies back down to the patients. And the third thing we need to do is really focus on what healthcare is supposed to do. It's supposed to make us feel better, live longer, and live healthier. And we need to focus on upstream things, preventive care, and things that actually make a difference and overall are cheaper than the things that we're currently doing in healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the first response goes to Eric Burnett. You have 1 minute to respond.
Okay, it's worth spending a little bit of time at some point looking over the Democratic Party platform from 2016. If we want to understand where the Democratic Party is right now on health care, look at that document. It is as clear as a bowl of mud. Okay? It basically talks about healthcare being a universal right and then says, well, everybody needs coverage and Medicare ought to start after 55. Medicare is not the litmus test. The litmus test is everybody gets healthcare. Everybody gets healthcare. Not coverage, not access, but healthcare. And until the Democratic Party gets to the point where it can say those words out loud, we're not going to solve the problem because we're not going to have the force of will of the party behind it.
Thank you so much. And Jim Crary, you get the last word on this. You've got 1 minute.
We wouldn't be having this question but for Bernie Sanders. He's the one that brought it up. He's the one that pushed it. And so, thank you, Bernie Sanders. I'm for Medicare for all. That's it. That's simple. You shouldn't have to worry about your age, your social economic status. your income. Everybody should have, not access, but like Eric said, should have medical insurance. And I would include, besides medical insurance, I would include vision, audio, and dental. If a kid can't see the board, what good does it do? He may be healthy as a horse, but if you can't see the board, you're not going to do well in school. So all the money that private insurance companies are spending on administrative costs, on executive compensation, on profit, all that money should be going into the healthcare system. We'd have a much better healthcare system, and it'd be a lot less expensive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next question is on labor. The first answer goes to Roz Mason, who will have 2 minutes to answer it. The first response after that is Tim White, and then Mike Byrne. The question on labor is, the right of workers to join together in unions to negotiate a fair return on their work is a fundamental human right. Over the last 40 years, the labor movement has come under attack from both political parties and politicians, making it more difficult for workers to organize and negotiate working conditions, wages and benefits. The consequences of a declining labor presence have been wage inequality for women, reduction in the number of workers having a living wage at retirement, and increasing incidences of accidents and death at work sites. Right-to-work laws have spread to 28 states in the last few years. These laws mean that workers can opt out of joining a union and or not pay union dues. The union is still required to provide its services to its members. These laws underfund unions, pit workers against each other, and effectively shackle worker power. What will you do to protect Oregon from right-to-work laws? And what will you do to support the labor movement and make it easier for workers to join unions and negotiate contracts? So the first response goes to Roz Mason. You've got 2 minutes. Roz, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So first of all, there is at least one, I believe maybe even more than that, decisions before the Supreme Court regarding the fate of the unions. And I'm an active member of my teachers' union, and I'm definitely in support of unions. However, my view is we can fix this if we do some shifting and the rights and the opportunities we extend to union members become something that is reasonable for all. Not everybody's in the kind of profession that allows them to organize in unions. We know that union members go and undergo risk to advocate, and it takes time and energy. To be fair, we need to be extending those opportunities across the board as part of belonging to our greater commonwealth as a nation. Why is that not happening? We have not done any kind of a good job, folks, wrangling classism. We still want to look at people and say, I'm going to value you based on the money in your bank account, your social standing, some of those very superficial things instead of your character. I mentioned earlier, this may be my last chance, so I'm going to say it, the issue of stress and how stress impacts us as human beings. We tend to look for something to get us out of this intolerable situation. People are so desperate. What's the ticket? The ticket is this fantasy of becoming wealthy and rich so that I can leave everybody else behind. It's time for us to call out the selfishness that is at the heart of so many of our financial arrangements right now. There is dignity in work. A good life, and I say this as a chaplain who helps people reflect as they come to the end of their lives. A good life is not an easy life, it's a meaningful life. Let's restore opportunities for the dignity of work.
Thank you so much, Roz. And then the first response goes to Tim White.
I spent my entire career working with the UAW. As I mentioned earlier, I almost got fired at supporting those guys once upon a time. I always had the respect that these were the people that were doing the hard work. And they were working the 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week sometimes. I respect the ability for, let me turn that another way. I am not in support of right-to-work states. The reason we have so many is because we have 33 states that are controlled by Republican governors and Republican legislatures. That's why it's following it. I was a student of economics. Back in the 30s and the 40s, there was a time when the unions fought for every step they could get. Then we got into the 60s, times were going good, people got a little lax, and then when we got to Reagan, they really went to war against the unions. Now the working class of this country It's on my flyer, has been decimated since the 1980s. We need to turn this around. I think the only way we're going to be able to do this is strong support for the unions in all occupations across this country. And this is coming from somebody that was on the management side of that aisle for 33 years. I see what their issue is, I agree with their issue, and I think we need to stand up and support them.
Thank you, Tim. And Mike Byrne, you have 1 minute to respond.
I'm one of those guys that did the hard work. Here's my journeyman card for the Bricklayers Union out of Portland, Local 1. I'm a master stonemason, and I teach apprentices how to lay stone, the bricklayers. I have a class coming up the last week of April, so you won't see me out on the campaign trail. The role of unions in the apprenticeship program, it's huge. It spills right over into education. That's something that we're already doing. These jobs are going begging. There's no roofers, there's no painters, there's no carpenters. Talk about the dignity of work. It's also a good paycheck. A journeyman bricklayer makes $36 an hour and $17 an hour fringe. The other thing we've got to do, we've got to organize the low-wage workers in healthcare. We all know what I'm talking about. I don't have enough time to tell you some of the stories. We all have stories about people that are doing the most unbelievable work, restoring dignity to people that are in there dying. They're getting $10 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next question is on access to education, pre-K through college. The first response goes to Eric Burnett, and then the two responses to that are Roz Mason and Jenny Nearing. So the question around education is, educating girls through the 10th grade in developing countries is considered by Paul Hawkins one of the top things we can do to improve our world. In the United States, we have low high school graduation rates and crippling student debt. With current trends to privatize education and underfund public education, how will you address the challenge of providing educational opportunities for everyone to have access to high quality education? So Eric Burnett, you've got 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, the first thing is, let's not drink their Kool-Aid, okay? Every time we use the marketplace as a model, we're putting our thumbs on the scale and we're biasing every decision and every discussion away from people and towards people with power, towards corporations, towards money. So no, we do not want to privatize this. Think about the implications of a privatized school, for Pete's sake. If you look at the balance sheet of the company that holds a contract on privatization, the kids appear as assets on that balance sheet. Think about that. No, that's not okay. That cannot be okay. I feel really strongly that we need to get education to everybody who needs it, and public education at all levels should be free. Should be free. In terms of debt, has anybody, raise a hand if you've ever heard in the financial sense the word jubilee. Does anybody? Ha ha. Yeah. Okay. So what just happened in this last tax bill? We just added 1.5 trillion to the deficit, something like that, just about. Isn't it funny that that's just about the same amount of student debt that's out there? What if we had taken that $1.5 trillion and just retired all the damn student debt? How about that? The reason I say this is my baby sister she's not my baby sister. I know she's 10 years younger than I am, I can say that. Is a teacher down in Cupertino, California. She's secretary of her teachers union. And she has been teaching long enough so that she has past students coming in saying, hey, Miss B, I think I want to become a teacher. And the thing she does is she says, get your wallet out and check and see. If you have to take out any debt, you'll never make enough money to pay it off. Don't do it if you can't do it without debt. That's a tragedy.
Thank you so much, Eric. The first response goes to Roz Mason. You have 1 minute to respond.
So I'm a teacher, and every day I see the impacts in the classroom of students who are wrestling with issues like poverty. And the follow-through of oftentimes poverty is unhealthy relationships, family pain, people struggling to try to make sense of a world where they don't feel like they're welcome. Now, again, it's that piece around dysregulation. Teachers take the front line of that, we bear the brunt of that, and we can testify to the problems and what's not working. Folks, because I'm a teacher, because I'm a chaplain, I'm going to hit that bell hard. We have an obligation to think, and I know you know this, we have to be thinking about what it means to be a human. And I believe it is our job to pass the baton to the next generation, to get ready, to be willing to say, look, we did the best we could, here you go. And that means that our most important asset is our children. And that should be where, without any reservation, we say whatever it takes, because that's ultimately the source of value.
Thank you so much. And Jenny, you get the last word on this.
So we know that education is one of the things that is going to bring down the income inequality that we're facing, but we need to look at what that educational system needs to look like. Our world is changing more rapidly than it ever has before. Technology, the growth of the population, the aging of our population, and the jobs of the future that our children are going to need to do are very different than what we have right now or what we can even envision in the future. And so our educational system needs to be focusing not just on teaching facts, but teaching how to learn. Because 5 to 10 years after they graduate, they may be learning completely new skills to be able to be successful in the world that we're seeing changing so rapidly around us. And we need to be looking at how we teach how to learn and how to connect to your environment and understand that you are responsible not just for yourself, but personal responsibility means you're responsible for yourself and your family and your community and the greater world, and that what you do affects everything else.
Thank you all so much. We are going to move back to the format where everyone is answering the last couple of questions. If you don't win the primary or the general, what will you do to keep this momentum going? Will you get involved in local organizing on important issues like housing and climate? Will you work to oppose dangerous anti-immigrant and anti-worker statewide ballot measures this fall? Or will you run for county commissioner or any number of other local seats that desperately need progressive candidates? And the first response to this goes to Roz.
All right. Okay. Well, this was my first public appearance. I jumped in about a month ago when I had this sudden sinking feeling that I had perhaps a perspective that wasn't common and could be shared. So thank you for being here and listening. I have been approached by people who work with the Oregon Senate Democrats saying, hey, run against the Republican in District 30. So maybe that's something I'll try. I have to say, though, what did not surface here, which is one of the strengths I believe I bring, is around security issues. And that's something that can appeal to rural voters in particular. I believe we have to create some kind of very thick network of Intermountain West progressives who can begin to speak to the fundamental needs and bring in those of us who have those ties to the east side of the mountains, the don't fence me in types, the people who are the ranchers and the farmers and living in those small towns, to really create that paradigm shift. So I'm going to keep talking about climate change. I have a climatechangechaplaincy.com website that I just started. I'm going to continue to, I think, write about how security relates to some of our fundamental issues, having a healthy society, but also takes in things like climate change. I want to say, just in closing, as a teacher and someone who tries to offer comfort to folks, that wherever we are on that continuum of learning about climate change, accept where you are and take that next little step. It can be so immobilizing that we back away thinking it's impossible. It really is all hands on deck for that one. And so I'm going to keep encouraging people to move forward. However that looks for you, we've got to deal with this, and little steps make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roz. And the next is Eric, and you have 2 minutes.
First, I'm going to go a little bit different direction. We're not making this easy on you. There are a whole bunch of people up here. This is a good thing. At the end of the 2020 election cycle, every single one of us needs to be in elected office somewhere in CD2. Okay? We now have bench. We have a really good bench in Central and Eastern Oregon, and this is a good thing. You probably have noticed that we've all kind of become friends. We like each other. You probably have a sense that we disagree with each other on a few things, but there is not a single person up here that should not be in elected office or otherwise really active politically by 2020. And that's going to happen. I'm getting to know these folks, and these folks are all in, and this is a good thing. Me, I am finding it increasingly interesting. I'm finding it increasingly interesting that there are a whole bunch of very possible things that we can do on a state level on the initiative process to challenge what's going on federally. So I guess I'm kind of becoming a little bit of a states' rights person from the progressive side. One of them is coming at us right now. We have an opportunity, and I've got the sign-up sheets here today. We've got the opportunity to move a net neutrality petition forward here in Oregon. It'll get challenged. It'll be a heck of a bar fight, but good. Let's have the bar fight. I'm all right with that. Here's another one that's coming at me. Okay. What is going to happen when we start to automate trucking? Think that one through. Silicon Valley will make billions. This is going to happen in the next 4 years or so, and I'm talking with Mark McPherson at the Teamsters about it. We are going to need to make sure we don't shift those billions of profits to Silicon Valley and all the costs onto us. That's another initiative.
Thank you so much, Eric. We're going to move on to Tim White. You have 2 minutes to answer this question.
Well, about a year ago, I sat down with the party chair up in Deschutes County, and he said, Bueller's not going to run again. Would you be interested in running in that district? I said, well, we can talk some more. Let's see what happens. So then I ended up going to Salem. Everybody remember Measure 100 last year? My wife and I were very active in that campaign, so we went over and we discovered that, lo and behold, I'm actually in Gene Wisniewski's district. I live across the street, otherwise I'd be in Bueller's seat. So I said, well, I can't run for Bueller's seat because I don't live in Bueller's district. As I said, my wife and I have always been very active for years in animal rights and environmental issues. They go hand in hand. This is something we've been doing since even before we were married 26 years ago. We were very passionate about it. If I don't win this, I will be going back to those things, because I think when people ask, what's the best thing you can do for the environment? We always say, well, if you go vegan, you have no idea the implications that does to improve your environment. So that's why they go hand in hand. My wife and I, we've done rescues on pit bulls. The last one Chris did, 300 pit bulls we rescued. I mean, we are passionate about this. And I'm passionate about getting into the CD2 seat because I think I can do more. I'm trying to get Moms Demand Action. I've met with them several times because I'm also along those lines of that's where my gun position is. I think we got a lot of issues with that. We've met with Humane Society because they know my animal rights past. So I'm trying to pull all this stuff together, and probably won't run for a local seat, but I can guarantee you 26 years and counting of being very passionate about animal rights and the environmental rights will continue in a very strong manner.
Thank you so much, Tim. Jamie, you have 2 minutes.
This felt like a trick question because I've been involved in this kind of stuff my entire life. Dr. King talked about the arc of history being long but bending towards justice, and it takes all of us to bend it in that way. I've been involved in public service in many roles, in elected, as staff, and led nonprofits, and so it's all about partnerships and bringing things together. Absolutely, I will remain committed and work on things. The folks in here worked on 88 a couple years ago. Remember that one? Trying to protect folks who had access to driver's license. It's just something I'm passionate about, something I believe in. I was a proud union member for over 10 years, and when I served on a council, I would show up at the early morning meetings that the hotel workers would have when they were organizing, talking about and advocating on issues. And it was folks who were poor and disadvantaged, and they were trying to get a union in their hotel. And I would show up because the police knew if I was there, they would leave people alone. And so showing up and talking to people and encouraging people is something I've always done. I put myself on the line. It's something I just fundamentally believe in. About this race, I will say that it's going to be important we can win this one. So let's make sure we are able to win. The primary will be won in Deschutes and Jackson County. The general will be won in Eastern Oregon. And so we need to be able to connect with folks in Central and Eastern Oregon. We won't win those counties, but we need to get enough votes to win the general. And we saw that with Measure 101 just recently. That's how we got Measure 1 to pass. So those connections are really key. Having traveled throughout the district, listening to folks, hearing about issues, building up those relationships has been key. And in terms of my own background, finished high school in Southern Oregon. My mom, who I mentioned, is taught in Southern and Central Oregon. My sister lives in Bend, and my wife's family's been ranching in Eastern Oregon for over 100 years. Relationships matter, and I think that's the way we win this race.
Thank you, Jamie. Jim, you've got 2 minutes.
When I filed to run in 2016, I looked at state offices. I looked at the county commissioner. But then where I am most interested in is at the national level. Campaign finance reform, health care, fixing Social Security, infrastructure, climate change. That's where my interest lies. I am not going to file for something else. It takes a whole lot of time and effort, and that's what I'm pouring into this one. Does that mean I'm going to go away? No, it does not mean I'm going to go away. It means that I'm not going to run for something else. When something irritates me, you can either do one of two things. You can complain about it, or actually three things. You could complain about it, you could ignore it, or you can step up to the plate and try to do something about it. And I'm in the latter group. And so I fully expect that if I'm not successful, and I certainly hope I am successful, but if I'm not, that there's going to be other issues that I find where I'm going to step up and address them and try to make something better because that's just who I am. As far as, let's see, I think that's pretty much the answer. I mean, I think that's it in a nutshell. I don't need to keep talking. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jim. Mike Byrne, got 2 minutes to answer this question.
After this election, I'm going to go right back to what I was doing, which means working with the same CASA kids that I've been working with for over 20 years. Those are relationships that don't go away. I'll spare you the details, but, Jamie was talking about the arc of justice. Well, I can talk about the trajectory of recovery. These things last for a long time. And the biggest part, let me tell you something about being a CASA. One of the first instances when I realized what I was doing was so important was when I was in a meeting with the Human Services, all the caseworkers, and it's 10 to 4, it's 5 to 4, and everybody's looking at their watch. I'm the volunteer. I'm there till it's over. They start shelving their papers, load up their briefcases, and then they're gone. And I'm still there with the mom. And the kids are in foster care. Do I get a deduction for that? Okay, so that's just one example because there's a couple kids that still really need me. Every single kid I was involved with as a CASA, I'm still involved with. Okay, I'm going to keep playing music for hospice patients. I'm going to keep doing restoration work in the gorge as a stonemason because I'm one of the few people that can still do this. I'm still going to teach apprentices how to lay stone, and I'm going to actually maybe make a career of that because it's a dying trade. I'm one of the few people that can still do it. But what I really want to do, and this is something I've discovered in this journey as a candidate, national service for all. Here, I just laid something out here. I've got 15 seconds left. We just need to have a discussion about that, and I'm going to keep that discussion going. We have no shared experience as Americans. Everybody has a job. Let's just keep talking about it. You're going to find I'm not the only one, but I'm going to keep talking about it. This is something that's going to happen by the time Barron Trump reaches majority.
Thank you so much, Mike. And Jenny?
So when I was looking at how we were going to fix healthcare, there were two things that I saw. One is we needed federal policy changes to make all of these things happen. but we also need community grassroots changes to happen too, not just for healthcare, but to keep us healthy. So I started looking at what was working around the country and around the world and all of the little pilot studies that had been done. And so I started a nonprofit which is getting ready to build and launch a village, which is it's a national project where you connect your neighbors to your neighbors helping neighbors to help seniors to age in their own homes, to stay healthy, to have the transportation they need, to stay independent enough that they can stay in their houses, that they can keep their pets, that they can stay involved with their community, and they can contribute back. What I saw from that story I told about the 4 homeless people is the seniors in our community are the fastest people entering poverty and the highest number of new homeless people. We have got to address those issues, and so I will continue to work on that community project while I am working on my campaign. I've stopped working as a physician to be able to do this, but that is something I'm still committed to doing. If Walden gets elected in 2018, I will expect to build that village faster, multiply those villages throughout the state and throughout the country with the model that we're building, and I will be back to run again in 2020.
We have one more question. So what do you want to be your last word for today? And we're going to start off with Eric. You have 2 minutes for this question as well.
Okay, I think by this point in the afternoon, folks have a pretty good idea of what my politics are and where I sit. This is going to be audience participation here, so work with me. We're going to do this really quickly. I'll bet you there are a lot of people in this room who have been fairly frustrated with the Democratic Party and its response and its effectiveness over the last number of years. Is that right? Okay, all right, here we go. Okay, hands up. Who knows what a shadow cabinet is? Shadow cabinet? Okay, all right, here we go. We're gonna make a progressive shadow cabinet. We're gonna do it right now. So shout it out to me. All right, here we go. Okay, this is progressive. So progressive shadow cabinet. Secretary of Treasury Elizabeth Warren. Okay, all right. Secretary of Defense. Help me out. Tammy Duckworth. Come on, keep it coming. Okay, Secretary of State. Canadian author, writes really cool stuff. Naomi Klein, that could happen. Okay, Secretary of Environment. EPA, who? Bill McKibben. Okay. All right. Keep it coming. Treasury, who else? Okay, come on. Who else is in the cabinet? Robert Reich, put him back in labor. What the heck, right? Okay. All right, now look what we've just done here. Okay, in 90 seconds, we have created a tool that Tom Perez and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have not managed to come up with in an entire darn year. This is the sort of help that we need to win these races here. We need responses to the things that are coming out of the Trump White House within the same news cycle. We cannot wait 4 days for a response from Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi. This is the sort of help we need at a national level. This race is going to get hot, and people are going to be paying attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Tim White, you have 2 minutes. Closing remarks.
Well, I think as all of you have probably figured out by now, we get along for a reason. We pretty much share our views on the Democratic platform up here. But that's not going to win us an election. If we were in one of the other 4 districts, this would be a lot more fun. But we are in the 2nd district with 150,000 independents, mostly right-leaning, and 190,000 Republicans, and 140,000 Democrats. If we can't figure out how to message to those Republicans, we're not going to be able to pull this off. So as much as I hate to compromise anything, I think compromise is the word of the day. We have to go out and understand where they're coming from. What is their fear? What is their concern? If we are going to bring them over, we have to convince them that we're on their side. Everywhere I go, the issue is jobs. They're worried about the jobs. They're worried about what's happening to what we call entitlement programs. There's 170,000 retirees in our district. You saw Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan already threaten to reduce Medicare and Social Security in 2018. I think some of these Republicans and independents might be a little bit concerned about that because, as I say, you think Greg Walden's going to stand in front of them? Absolutely not. He will be first in lockstep with them. So this is what I am trying to do. Yes, I have a progressive. You can go to my website. You can find out I'm as progressive as anybody standing up here. But I'm also the one that realizes I have to go after Republicans at this point. If we don't start now, we don't wait until after primary and suddenly pivot and say, oh, by the way, I'm for your side now. We have to do this now. We have 8 months to convince these people. They know Walden hasn't done enough for them. They're just not convinced we're the answer. We have to convince them we are the answer.
Thank you so much. Jamie McLeod-Skinner, you've got 2 minutes.
Thanks. Democrats have not been trusted in rural areas because Democrats have not shown up. Democrats have focused on urban areas and not done the things and not championed legislation that helps rural communities. That's why we need to be out throughout our district and stepping up for and helping folks out. I also want to draw a clear distinction between the Republicans in Washington, D.C., who are hurting us all, and our friends and neighbors around the district who are Republicans, who are good people, who focus on Oregon values, the same things that we are concerned about, caring for our families, caring for our communities. Don't confuse the two, because we not only need to build bridges with folks, independents, Republicans throughout our district, to win political office and to be in decision-making roles. More importantly, we have to build those relationships so that we can come together, build bridges, and come up with solutions for our communities. We need to be, because there's a tremendous amount of progressive ideas out in red rural Oregon that people are talking about. Healthcare, schools, net neutrality. These are key issues throughout our district. But we have to show up, use language that bridges and that enables us to have these conversations and build these relationships. That's how we're going to win this race, and that's really key to it. We need intense progressive change in Washington. We have a president who is focused on being divisive and dividing us. If you want to really piss him off, then build bridges with your neighbor. Find common ground with folks that you don't think you can agree on and talk about how we can bring about change, bring about positive change, bring about health care for everyone. It's the #1 issue in Eastern Oregon, but people haven't trusted Democrats because we haven't shown up and spoke and listened, first of all, and then also spoken in a way that people can be connected. The last word I want to say is about you all and the people in this room. We've got a 7th grader in this room. Darren, I don't know if you're still here. He is the future, and that's where our policies need to go to care for our community. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, Jim Kerr, you've got 2 minutes.
When I was working, I had a friend, and he was a real fantasy football nut. He would spend literally weeks preparing for the draft. And I used to look at this guy and think, wow, what if the voters would spend 1/4 of the time looking at the issues and the candidates that this guy spends? We would have the most informed electorate in the whole world. And I'm talking from my own personal experience, but everyone up here has probably done pretty much the same thing in varying degrees. We spend a lot of time, we spend time away from our homes, we spend our own money, and we've done a lot of work to be up here to say, we want to represent you. And here's what my ask is of you. You all spent at least 6 hours today coming to this thing. Half an hour driving here, half an hour going home, 2 hours sitting here. That's 6 hours. My ask is, or 3 hours, pardon me. Pardon me. 3 hours. So here's my ask. What I want you to do, if you would please, we've had about 15 minutes to try to convey to you who we are, what our positions are on the different issues, and why you should vote for us. And we've done it in 1 and 2 minute increments. It's really not sufficient. It's a good form. At least you get to see who we are. You get to hear us. Here's my ask. Spend another 3 hours. It'll be a total of 6. Spend another 3 hours. Go to each of our websites. Spend 30 minutes on each of our websites and look at our proposed solutions to the different issues. What is our proposed solution for healthcare? What is our proposed solution for climate change? How about fixing Social Security? And then compare and contrast us. That'll be fair. If you have any questions, I've tried to pass out my card to everybody. Give us a call, and we can answer it in much more than 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. All right.
So I'm trying to figure out what closing statement I'm going to make this time. So I wrote this down. Actually, I have all these handwritten notes. But the important thing is, Mike, remember how you felt when you first announced your candidacy, which was over a year ago. I've kind of felt the same way I did yesterday when the U.S. Senate caved on the Dreamers. It's like, come on. I mean, the system is rigged. Should we make that a chant? The system is rigged. No need, because we know that. So what's a guy going to do about it? I'm a grandparent. It's like, I can't overstate how important this is. So I can't just sit on the sidelines. I'm not a politician. My only elected office was the PTA presidency in Parkdale. We had some serious issues which we dealt with. And we dealt with them in a District 2 way. We didn't go to the federal government looking for funds to replace the drinking fountain that was a lead leaching dispensary in the gym. No, we took care of ourselves. We didn't ask the state to hire a Spanish teacher, after-school Spanish teacher, because over half the kids were Latino. No, we hired an after-school teacher ourselves. We didn't ask for somebody to come in and develop an anti-drug program. We did that ourselves. We got helmets for all the kids, bike helmets for all the kids, so everybody had a helmet. So listen, I'm District 2. I don't have to go out and find out what's going on in District 2. I was raised in District 2. I worked in the woods, worked on the ranches. I understand what they're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right, Jenny, you've got 2 minutes.
So I've been enjoying this last week, which has been filled with visits to meet and greets where I get a chance to talk for more than a minute or two at a time. I've had personal sit-downs with people where people really get to know me. And I've been surprised and maybe a little disappointed that I've been asked a few times, you seem really nice. Do you think you can really govern and deal with all that politics when you get there? And it tells me that we need to change and reframe this narrative. We need to get past the fact, and we can't believe in the story that if you're nice, you can't make powerful changes. And we need to get past the story that you have to be angry to make a difference. Because right now, we need to work together to make all these changes happen. It is not us versus them. Us versus them only serves the people in power. If we want to make changes, we need to recognize, and I'll say, it is just us. And we are in this together to make the changes that are going to benefit all of us. I want people in Congress, I want people in power who are going to be able to make the changes that benefit everyone, not just the people who end up voting for us to get there in the first place, but every single person in this district. As a physician, people have put their trust in me to always work for their best interests. Help me to do that in Congress.
Thank you so much. And Roz, you have 2 minutes and the final word.
Any of you concerned about climate change? Would you raise your hand? Okay. So I'm going to do that thing where I'm unpopular. And I know I've been the candidate who is very emotional. But I also, in my good moments, I bring groundedness and calm. Because I know that anxiety is contagious, but calmness is contagious too. And I'm hoping that we can all cultivate a little bit more of that. And it's going to take that courage and calmness to keep climate change on the forefront of our minds. This is the game changer. I think we can imagine what's going to happen when we have massive flows throughout our country, people whose houses no longer have any market value because they're underwater. Where are those people going to go? How are we going to treat people when we need massive relocations, massive redistributions of wealth? We are already not able to fund the disasters that are taking place. So my friends, please join me in continuing to learn. I'd like to throw out, we can enfranchise folks on the east side by talking about things like carbon farming. There are approaches that will meet them where they live. I think people who have to struggle for a living with the land understand viscerally what it means to face some survival threats. And folks will rally around those security challenges, but I think they will also, at their deepest sense, understand that there are values at stake. I came here not because I just wanted to be part of the conversation, but I also genuinely think that if I were in Washington, D.C., I could bring something valuable. I could continue to help us stay calm, stay attuned to what is potentially, and by all signs, an existential threat. It's hard to keep our eyes on the prize. Please join me in my last 15 seconds. Feel your feet. Feel yourself supported by the chair. Take a nice, deep breath. And go forth and do whatever you feel called to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the candidates. I'm going to invite Andy up here for closing statements. Thank you all. You've been wonderful.
All righty. And thank you, Rebecca, for doing such a great job moderating. Wow. Finally, this level of engagement will get us to the finish line by electing a congressperson with integrity that truly represents our district. Please give a big hand to our dedicated candidates and to yourselves for taking an interest in this important primary.